Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Blunt Truth About Marijuana and Driving for Student Athletes. I am Cassidy O'Connor, Public Affairs Specialist for AAA Northeast. I want to thank you all for joining us today to discuss an issue that is a serious threat to today's youth. AAA Foundation research from the state of Washington demonstrates that fatal road crashes involving marijuana doubled after the state legalized recreational use. A series of studies revealed drivers that operate under the influence of marijuana are twice as likely to crash as an unimpaired driver. Here at AAA Northeast, we are committed to sharing our educational resources and believe that thoughtful education and awareness can make a positive impact in our communities. We focused on student athletes for today's session for a few reasons. As a former athlete and coach, I know the level of responsibility and leadership an athlete can hold in the school. So ensuring your athletes are leading by example and making safe and healthy choices can positively influence the student body. Also, we focus on ways athletes can avoid sports injuries, but it is important to remember that the leading cause of injuries and death for teens is car crashes. We are here today as a good reminder that coaching on safety is both on and off the field. As a traffic safety educator for the club, I have been delivering a program in high school health classes called Shifting Gears, the blunt truth about marijuana and driving, educating thousands of students in AAA Northeast territory on the dangers of marijuana impaired driving. The eye-opening, valuable conversations I have had with teens about their driving behaviors and their attitudes around marijuana use makes me so proud to continue to teach the program and stress the importance of driving safely and sober to all of our young drivers. Here with me today are wonderful traffic safety partners to share more about how athletic policies and leadership skills help foster responsible choices and behaviors for teen drivers. I want to thank you all again for participating in this webinar. First, I'm pleased to welcome Kelsey Lynch. Kelsey has been a highway safety program coordinator with the Office on Highway Safety at Rhode Island Department of Transportation since 2018. The traffic safety emphasis areas that she covers include pedestrian and bicycle safety, seatbelt safety, child passenger safety, and young driver safety. Prior to her employment at the Rhode Island DOT, Kelsey was a classroom teacher in many different grade levels. Her time at Rhode Island DOT has been spent working closely with law enforcement and community programs across the state to further advocate for and support safer roadways in Rhode Island. So, Kelsey, take it.
Thank you so much, Cassidy. So as she mentioned, prior to my profession at RIDA, I did work as a teacher in many different schools with many different ability levels and in many different grades, including high school. The young drivers emphasis area has remained one of my strongest and most passionate emphasis areas to cover since coming to RIDA, given my past work history. I know that on the call today, we have some coaches, athletic directors, and youth advocates from different organizations. I also know that we have some very young athletes. And with that title, as Cassidy mentioned, there comes a certain level of responsibility. Whether you know it or not, you are viewed as role models in your schools and communities. For young athletes, it might be time for you to start thinking about getting your driver's license, or perhaps some of you are already in that process. While that's an extremely exciting time, there are so many factors in safety to consider. First, there's understanding the dangers on our roadway and basic road safety emphasis areas, such as distracted driving, seatbelt usage, impaired driving, and speeding, to name a few. For distracted driving, research has found that dialing a phone number while driving increases a teen's risk of crashing by 6 times, and texting while driving increases that risk by 23 times. Talking or texting on the phone takes a young driver's eyes off the road and the task of driving and reduces your ability to react to a roadway hazard or incident. And distracted driving is not just about cell phones, it's about how loud you're listening to the music in your car. Are you putting on makeup while you're driving? Do you have other peers in your car that could be adding to your distraction? This, coupled with being a new driver, adds an element of risk to the roadway. And there's seatbelt usage, like I mentioned. Wearing a seatbelt can increase your likelihood of surviving a crash by 50%. Yet sadly, both locally and nationally, 45% of young driver fatalities and passenger fatalities that are young are unbuckled. And sadly, in this country, the lowest usage belt rate is among teen drivers. So the sad thing here, guys, it takes a few seconds to do something that could really save your life. I also mentioned impaired driving. In Rhode Island, impaired driving is illegal and it is strictly and heavily enforced. There are many zero tolerance laws, including those for THC. And I know we have a state trooper on the call, but there is also a new traffic safety unit that is focusing strictly on the enforcement of impaired driving. If you're going to do it, you're going to get caught. Driver inexperience coupled with any of these behaviors puts young drivers at an even higher risk on roadways. In fact, teen drivers have crash rates that are 3 times higher than those that are 20 years or older. Keeping all of this in mind, Rhode Island has multi-level graduated licensing laws that ensure sufficient training, education, exposure, and experience for young drivers who are newly behind the wheel. The GDL, as listed in Rhode Island General Law, is listed as 31-10-6, and it has 3 levels of licenses. The first that you can apply for is your limited instruction permit, or more commonly known as your learner's permit. In order to apply for this, you have to be at least 16 years of age, but under 18. Applicants will also need to have completed the 33-hour CCRI driver's ed course, receive a certificate from that course, and have passed successfully the standardized written exam approved by the DMV. I would also like to point out that the 33-hour course at CCRI focuses 8 hours on the effects of impaired driving, and it also covers distracted driving. Both are listed in the standardized exam from the DMV. Applicants who are looking to get their learner's permit will need their birth certificate, driver's ed certificate from CCRI, and their social security card to apply. Parents or guardians will need to be with their child to be present to show those IDs at the DMV, or the teen must have a notarized parent-signed application prior to going to the DMV if a parent can't make it. Once a limited instruction permit is obtained, it is okay to drive a car as long as your permit is always on hand when driving, the supervising driver is always in the front seat, and that supervising driver needs to be at least 21 years of age with a full license for at least 5 years. No one else can be in the front seat while you have your learner's permit. Seatbelt usage is mandatory, not only for the driver, but for anybody else that is in the vehicle with the learner's permit holder. This is per our primary seatbelt law for the state, 31-22-22. And your limited instruction or learner permit is valid for 1 year. Typically, when you receive your learner's permit, you're also going to have your road test scheduled for 6 months after that. The second level of licensure that can be applied for is the limited provisional license. So applicants, everything that's needed for this license, applicants must have had a learner's permit for at least 6 months. They cannot have been convicted of a motor vehicle moving violation or seatbelt infraction during that time. They will also need a parent or guardian signed affidavit that confirm at least 50 supervised hours of driving, 10 of which need to be at night. You will have to have successfully passed your road test, which is administered by the DMV, and there is no driving between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. Now, I know we do have athletic directors, coaches, and young athletes on the call. I do want to let you know about the provision that allows driving from home to school and back from 4 to 5 a.m. if it's to a sponsored athletic activity where no transport is provided by the school. Again, for those of you on the call that are athletes, you might know that already. For the first 12 months of having your provisional license, no more than 1 passenger under 21 is allowed in the vehicle. We spoke earlier about distracted driving. This goes even further to eliminate other distractions. I mentioned that peers in the car can be a distraction. This is keeping that noise level down and keeping your focus on the roadway. These restrictions don't apply, however, if the provisional license holder is being supervised by that 21 years or old driver that has had their license for 5 years, that is supervising under those provisions. And then lastly, under the provisional, drivers under 18 are not allowed to use cell phones, period. Even hands-free devices are not allowed. This is against the law. Your third and final license that you can apply for is the probably most exciting, the full operator's license. Applicants need to be at least 17 years old by this time. They need to have had their limited provisional license for 12 months. Again, they cannot have been convicted of a moving violation or a seatbelt infraction during those preceding 6 months. And then, again, the fun part, but the responsibility factor, is that the restrictions on nighttime driving, passenger limitations, and supervision do not apply with a full license. However, any traffic safety advocate that you meet will still encourage that you and your families set rules and guidelines to ensure safety behind the wheel every trip, every time. I hope you all continue to be leaders in your communities that make safe driving a priority. And by doing so, you're also going to be empowering the peers around you to do the same. I'd like to thank AAA for having me here today to speak, and I encourage anybody that has any further questions. I know Cassidy will have a final slide with my contact information. Please do so if anything comes to mind after the fact. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Kelsey, and thank you for such valuable, important information, and especially with those restrictions like passenger restrictions or nighttime driving, and with the theme of how we're talking to athletes and coaches, it's important to be reminded of that, not allow your athletes to break those laws just because you have games or practices. So to kind of keep those things in mind, and that extra responsibility of being role model and making sure they're making the right decisions. Absolutely. I do have a quick question. So for someone under the age of 18, so who technically owns their license? Is it the driver, or is it the parent or the state?
I'm sorry, one more time on that question. My audio is going in and out.
No, that's who technically owns their license? Is it the driver, so if they're under 18, their parent, or the state?
It is under the driver's name, but with the supervision of their parent or guardian.
Okay, so that's important for any teen athletes that are listening. Okay, thank you. So next, I am pleased to introduce Sergeant Wesley Pennington from the Rhode Island State Police, who I have had, the great opportunity of working closely with multiple times. So Sergeant Pennington joined the Rhode Island State Police in 1994 and has worked at each of the state police's 5 barracks. He served as a drug recognition expert and instructor, and continues to be a standardized field sobriety test instructor. Prior to the fall of 2015, Sergeant Pennington volunteered to be part of a collaboration between the state police and the state's Office on Highway Safety to combat impaired driving. He was one of the state's top impaired driving enforcers. Over the course of his career, Sergeant Pennington has consistently led the state police in impaired driving arrests. Sergeant Pennington is also a head football coach at North Smithfield High School. He has been the head football coach there for the past 15 years. Sergeant Pennington was voted the Rhode Island High School Football Coach of the Year in 2019. He also won the state championship for Division IV in 2019. Sergeant Pennington is also an ordained pastor, of which he has been for the past 7 years. So the man of many hats. Take it away.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, you just, as you list those things, I don't realize, how many things I'm actually involved in.
And we could go on. We could talk about the grilling master too.
But it's a pleasure being here this afternoon, and thank you, and thank AAA for hosting this. And I want to kind of, if I can, kind of come at a few different angles. First, as a 26-year veteran of the Rhode Island State Police and law enforcement officer, it's so important that that you're being careful when you get in a car, whether you're putting on your seatbelt, distracted driving, impaired driving. We see so many fatal crashes on our highways due to impaired driving, and it from every range and every level we see this. And like Kelsey had mentioned, with the collaboration between the Rhode Island State Police and the Office of Highway Safety, RIDOT, we put together the traffic safety unit. The traffic safety unit, its sole mission is to go out and detect impaired operators, whether they be impaired by alcohol or something other than alcohol, marijuana, drugs, illicit drugs, whatever that may be. This unit is specifically tasked with going out and detecting these impaired operators, with the hope of getting our fatal crashes due to impairment down to 0. And I believe that we can do that in this state, because this state's small enough And it really comes down to if we take care of each other and we look after each other, we can do that. You know, if someone makes a phone call, hey, I need a ride, someone go pick them up, give them a ride, call them an Uber or a taxi to get them home safely. I really believe that we as a state, a small state, can get to zero fatalities due to impaired driving, because every single one of these fatalities that we're talking about are 100% preventable. So that is a heavy weight for me to carry as I do the job as being a state trooper. But as you had mentioned, Cassidy, that I'm also a head football coach at North Smithfield High School, and we have co-opted with North St. Charles High School as well. So I have the pleasure of coaching, and I look at it as mentoring young student athletes. You know, and one of the things that I really kind of stress with my athletes is that, one, you're a student first, and how you carry yourself and the things that you do and the decisions that you make are so important, because those things go with you and you carry those along with you. It's even with social media, what you're posting on social media, what pictures you're putting up, what groups you're with, the things that you're saying on social media. People look at those things, they make judgment on you, and it can affect your ability to get into college for future jobs and so forth. And, you know, as a coach, it's so important for me to be a good role model, which means, you know, I have to carry myself in the right way. I have to speak in the right way. When I speak to them, when I'm coaching, you know, not allowing my attitude to go in a certain direction, and always staying in control, and always allowing them to see a side of me that is good for them to see, you know, so that they can, you know, follow along with that and also become better students and better athletes and better people. I mean, at the end of the day, I hope to produce better people, whether they go on to play collegiate sports, or if they just go on to college or to get a job at the end of this, that they're going to be better people in their communities, to be better citizens. You know, and I've seen over the years, we've had players that have graduated and gone on to be law enforcement officers because their coach was a law enforcement officer. You know, so that is a big part that I carry, because as I see these young men wanting to develop them, and I speak to them a lot about what they do off the field, you know, going to parties or hanging out with the wrong crew that might have alcohol involved or marijuana involved, and making the right decisions, and how, you know, one bad decision can really change everything for them. And I really have a no tolerance policy when it comes to alcohol and marijuana. If that's ever an issue with any of my players, it's instant termination, because it's just something that we can. I can't have a player on the field intoxicated or high playing football. You know, for a few reasons. One, I'm a Rhode Island state trooper, you know, so, and two, you know, it's just not safe, and it's not healthy, and it's not a good thing. So it's a no tolerance policy in reference to that, and they all know it. And luckily, I haven't had a lot of issues with that. And I think simply because we talk about it, we address these things, we deal with these things on an everyday basis. And even if there's something that's small that comes up, you know, we talk about it and we address it, so that they know and they kind of get the idea on what it means and what it looks like to make good decisions. You know, and also, you know, as an ordained pastor, so, you know, I kind of care about, you know, where they're coming from spiritually, or their, you know, mental and physical positions and where they are. So, you know, it really matters to me. I kind of work on the whole person and the whole student in order to see something that's really productive come at the end of this. In reference to law enforcement, I've spoken, I think I've done with Diana a course in North Smithfield on marijuana and the problems with using marijuana and being a student, and how their brains work and how our brains work. And I could just go into and probably take up the rest of the webinar talking about how our brains work and how these things affect us. But I think just kind of for the student athlete, it's important for them to see that we are transparent before them, and that we're real before them, and that I'm not just kind of putting on a show or an act, but this is really who I am, and this is really what I do and how I live. And I think when they see that, they know it's genuine, and that makes them want to kind of follow suit. You know, and if they have an issue, knowing that, you know, no matter what the problem is, they can come to me and talk to me, and I'm more like the father versus the trooper that they can call, and we can have these conversations, and even have meetings and conversations with their families, with their parents, so that we can help them be who they're supposed to be.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. It's such that, valuable relationship between a coach and their athlete.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I'm excited that you're doing this for student athletes, because this is awesome. And I hope that we can get this out into all the schools so that all the student athletes have to watch this in order that they would just make the right decisions. Making the right decisions is everything, because one bad decision, can change your life forever. And I'll say that again, one bad decision can change your life forever. So make the right decisions, be smart, think about everything that you do, think about what the results can be, what the ramifications of that can be. And it's not worth it. It's really not. It's not worth drinking alcohol and getting a car, smoking weed, getting a car and driving. It's not worth your life. It's not worth the life of the people that are in the car with you. It really isn't. It really, really isn't. So make the right choices. Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, AAA, for putting this on. This is a worthwhile webinar, and I hope that everyone gets something out of this. And like Kelsey said, my number and my email address will be up. If you have any questions for me, if you have any concerns, anything you want to ask me about, please feel free to contact me.
Yes, thank you so much. Such great, important points. And, I've been a youth coach before. I've also been an assistant coach at the high school level. And I agree with you. I've always tried to make it clear that, you as athletes, you're such a representation of the town or the school or both. So, anything from the language you use at away games to making the right choices. It's really important that, like you said, you really build those those qualities as a whole, as a person. And it's more than just focusing on like the skills of the sport, which is important as well, but especially at, youth sports or high school level, it's so much more than that. And I do have a quick question as your hat as a DRE, because I know, the two of us, we were even this morning delivering a shifting gears program, but I know often this question comes up, especially with the teens, because there is a lot of misinformation around marijuana impairment when it comes to driving, and a lot of misconceptions. But often we get asked, can't I just refuse a test? So do you want to just kind of address really quickly the refusal, back to kind of bringing it to kind of those laws and understanding that kind of aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're referring to is the consent law, and when you apply for your license and you sign saying I'm willing to accept this license, what you're doing is it's an implied consent that if a police officer asks you to submit to a chemical test or to a blood test to see if you're impaired in any way, that you would take that test. And that's what we call an implied consent. And if you refuse, right, now the law says that you can refuse to give a test, but what happens is when you refuse, your license automatically gets suspended. Because it is a privilege, not a right, to drive in the state of Rhode Island. So that privilege gets taken away until a time that you go before a magistrate and they determine your case. But yeah, you lose your license. That's it until a judge deems when you can get it back. And for some people, never. For if you're a teen, it's even more strict, and you could get your license taken away permanently. So that implied consent, it applies. Every single person that has a license in the state of Rhode Island has made that implied consent that they would submit to a chemical test if an officer asked them to do so. You can refuse. You can. The law says you can. But when you do, your license will automatically get suspended.
Yes, and you said it best. Driving is a privilege; it's not a right, and that's so important for young drivers to understand. And last but certainly not least, I am so pleased to introduce Rebecca White. Rebecca is the program coordinator for Youth Driven, which is a traffic safety and leadership program for Rhode Island high school students. Youth Driven is led by the Rhode Island Student Assistance Services and supported by Rhode Island DOT Office on Highway Safety. Rebecca is also a motivational speaker and has shared her drunk driving crash story to students from across the country. She has been a drunk driving victim advocate for over 20 years and was also featured on Rhode Island DOT's Ripple Effect drunk driving campaign. So I'll turn it over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Cassidy. Thank you, AAA, for having me today. It's an honor to be here with this panel. I know some of them professionally very well, and I'm thrilled to be here to be talking to the coaches and athletic directors and student athletes today because this topic is important. So I'm here to touch upon the leadership aspect of and traffic safety at the same time. So as mentioned in my intro, I was involved personally by a traffic safety crash. I was involved in a drunk driving crash when I was in middle school. I was 14 years old. And from that crash, I was rear-ended, our car was rear-ended by a drunk driver. The drunk driver had taken marijuana, cocaine, and had an alcohol blood level nearly twice over the legal limit at the time. And from that crash, the drunk driver hit our car, and sadly, my mother and best friend passed away from that crash. And as a 14-year-old, that impacted my life tremendously. And at the time, I needed to find a way to have a positive outlet in the sense of having a voice in prevention and to educate others about the dangers around traffic safety and the dangers of drunk driving and the importance of making good choices. So that's where I found Mother's Day of Drunk Driving here in Rhode Island and a program called Team Spirit. That Team Spirit program has evolved over the years, and I'm happy to say that our youth-driven program is a reboot almost of that program. We followed a very similar agenda in that we teach and educate students about traffic safety and leadership skills. And from that program, students that attend our kickoff event, which is our summer summit, they will create an action plan that they then go back to their schools and community and implement throughout that entire school year. Within that action plan, they have components teaching and educating their school and community about drunk driving, distracted driving, seatbelt safety, speeding, as well as impaired driving around marijuana specifically too. And I'm honored to be the program coordinator. It is a dream come true for me because I'm very passionate about teaching our youth because they are our future and they have an important role on this topic of traffic safety and being leaders within their schools and communities. And I wanted to also mention that our kickoff event, as I mentioned, is a summer summit, and students that are interested can register on our website at www.youthdriven.org. It is free to attend. It is a daytime camp summit this year due to COVID. It will be held at Rhode Island College. And again, it's open to any Rhode Island high school student or 8th grader going into their freshman year. At the end of this presentation, that information will pop up on the screen, so you're more than welcome to check it out. And I encourage you to, because there are also resources around traffic safety for schools and communities on our website, as well as our traffic safety podcast that actually Sergeant Wes Pennington was recently on one of our last episodes, and he does touch upon the state trooper aspect and perspective around impaired driving. So we had a great interview and a lot of highlights around impaired driving around marijuana. But I also today wanted to talk to you about leadership values. And our values are so very important because they help us to grow and to develop. And they help us to create a future and the experience that we want to have. And every individual and every organization is involved in making hundreds of decisions every day. And the decisions that we make are a reflection of our values and beliefs, and they are always directed towards a specific purpose. And with teams and athletes today, I love this next portion about values and how important it is as a team to have a cohesive goal as a team. And when we have our values when we use our values to make decisions, we make a deliberate choice to focus on what is important to us. When values are shared, such as on a team, they build internal cohesion within the group. And in our society, athletes are looked upon as leaders, as mentioned today by our other panelists. And it is so important to remind student athletes of this fact. Whether they realize it or not, they are leaders within their schools. And other students look up to them. And they will be influenced by the choices that those student athletes make. I know this because I was once a student athlete, and I remember as a young freshman looking up to those upperclassmen and thinking they were the coolest people on the face of the earth, and it's just the way it is. So it's really important to drive home the message that the things that our student athletes do on and off the field are so important because they are being watched by everyone, especially the younger youth. And what they do on and off the field matters. Students may not realize this, but hearing it from their coaches and athletic directors is important. And it will make them think twice about making poor choices in the future, reminding them that they are student athletes and that they are representing not only their school, but their community as well. And I know that Sergeant Pennington mentioned this briefly about social media, but I also want to mention on it too. And what student athletes post matter. And in a day and age where this past year, the one way we all stay connected was through social media, it's just a part of our life now and our culture. But it's important to drive home to student athletes and all students really that not only your future jobs and getting into college and how the world perceives you is all through that one little window that they have onto your social media accounts. So it's so important what they post and what they choose to share. And I always tell my student leaders to be careful with what they post. And here's my rule of thumb that I always tell them. I tell them that when you are posting something, if you wouldn't want your grandparent or a coach or a priest or another adult that you admire to see it, then you shouldn't be posting it. Encourage students to not use social media while driving either. I do want to drive that home. I know it's a very common theme on certain platforms that it's okay to do so. And I just want to encourage our viewers, don't use social media, don't be on your phones, period, while you're driving, but especially social media. And even if they are joking in a post, the world may not know that they're joking. So to just be careful with what they're saying. And as coaches, the coaches that are watching this, you are the ultimate influencer for some of these students. You are their leader. And students look up to you and respect and listen to what you have to say. And never underestimate your influence on your athletes. If you have a conversation with your team about making good choices, such as don't use drugs or alcohol, as Sergeant Pennington does with his team, driving safely, wear your seatbelt, don't speed, they will think twice about doing it before getting behind the wheel. And when they're in a certain situation, they'll think of the words that you share with them. Being a leader is not easy. And I always say that to our students. It takes sacrifice, it takes discipline, and it also means leading by example. And that is actually our tagline here at Youth Driven, because it's not easy to lead by example sometimes, but it's so necessary when you want to make change. And you have the power to make a difference. So traffic safety is a team sport, and imagine our entire state and community as one team. Together we can educate and encourage one another, and not just our youth, but our entire community about the importance of making safe choices on our roadways to prevent others from getting hurt or killed. We are all part of a bigger team. Don't ever forget that. And if we continue to lead by example in making safe choices when getting behind the wheel, we can all have safer roads for everyone. So I want to again thank AAA for having me today. And if you want to learn more information about Youth Driven, please visit us on our website, and you can contact me as well from the last slide in this presentation. But thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for sharing your story and having the courage to turn something like that into such positive and impactful. It's really, I highly respect you for that. And the point you made too about social media apps while driving is such an important point too right now, because we know that the same people who will use TikTok or Snapchat while driving will say that they don't text and drive, and they think it's totally different things, and one's bad and one's not, right? But it's operating that phone using that device and that distraction, that's a huge danger and a huge problem right now. I see it every day on my news feeds on various accounts. So very important point. So I do want to thank you all again for being here. I can't thank you guys enough, and I'm, was so excited to do this with you guys. And if anyone who's on the call who is a coach or a teacher or, prevention advocate who wants to bring shifting gears to their classroom or organization, feel free to visit AAA.com/shifting gears, or just email me directly if you would like the program. Our program is free and can also be available. It's available virtually, so definitely easy. And I do have, I believe, one comment from my lovely supervisor, Diana, who's a huge, my panelists here know her very well, and she is a huge traffic safety expert, and she wanted to thank all the coaches who are, who talk about these issues with their athletes, and a good reminder to athletes that carpooling is not allowed and that there is a passenger restriction to one passenger under 21 allowed in a team's vehicle. So no carpooling to practices and games, which again, when we were talking about those restrictions and the late night restrictions and passenger restrictions, it's all so important to keep that in mind for coaches and not to kind of break those rules because, the risks of those things, we have those laws in place for a reason. So I want to thank everyone again. Again, any questions that come up after the fact for anyone, you can reach out to anyone here that you see on the screen, and stay safe, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Cassidy.
Thank you.
Thank you.